So hopefully Rod will be able to join us. This is the Node LTS working group meeting for December 14th. Before we go on, does anybody have any additional agenda items? Okay. Hearing nothing, we'll just go ahead with what we have. I don't think we need to do any kind of stand-up on this. Just kind of level set where we're at. We had a few new releases go out. I think before last for the security updates. I am looking at possibly cutting a new 4.2 or even a 4.3 release in January. We have quite a few staged commits in 4x staging right now. We have two Semver miners that we're also sitting there waiting to land as well. Those are the things that we discussed previously about improving the kind of the post-mortem debugging and checking. So wasn't planning on doing anything there over the holidays, though, and probably early January look at pulling those staged commits into a release. Anyone have any concerns with that or anything else with regards to releases?
Do we have a list of the proposed ones? Just I know the last time we had a list we could look through and see that if they were doc or whatever kind of things.
I'll be pulling those together. They're all currently everything's currently in VX.
Just look at v4.x staging. Like everything's gonna be in there. So
yeah. So I guess just everything from there, is that the plan?
I think the two Semver miners that are waiting have not landed in staging yet. We just need to go pull those back still.
Do you have any idea how many commits are in there right now? Because otherwise it might be better to just do a release this week if there's already a lot, because otherwise there'll be really a lot by the time January rolls around.
I think there's probably more than 50 or 70 of them, but we'd have to check.
Yeah.
Although, do people want a new release just before Christmas?
Yeah, I don't really know.
That's kind of what I'm thinking about is we don't want to stage them up. We don't want to get too far behind, but at the same time, I'm not sure if there's much value in cutting it right before Christmas.
At the same time, it's not like people have to upgrade. It's just if people are able to, this is an option. It fixes random things that have already been fixed and stable. So
yeah.
But I think some people will feel pressure to upgrade. Just because it's out there. So if there was something that was waiting and important, I'd say push it through. Otherwise, I'd be like, let's do it early in January.
I'm not opposed to doing it before Christmas. I'm just not sure there's going to be much value personally. But I definitely don't want to see them stacked up too far. Why don't we just take a look at it and see if any of them that are there are critical enough, then we can go ahead and do something before. You know what I mean?
I'd prefer if we didn't get too behind on it and make sure we're still getting these stuff in the hands of 4.x users, if possible.
Okay. I'll take a look at it and at least come up with a list of commits, kind of the candidate list, and try to get that posted by let's say by Thursday, and then we'll figure out what to do from there. Does that sound good?
Sure.
One thing I was just thinking about that's not on the agenda, but maybe we should bring it up, is LTS for 0.12 and how much of the stuff from 4.2 we want to be backporting to 0.12 as well, and if the schedules of those should be a little bit more coalesced, because I think we've been putting a lot more attention on V4.
We should move 0.12 into maintenance mode.
I'm not opposed to that. I mean, especially if it'll discourage people from going to 0.12. I think 0.10 is by far the one we should be looking at the most, since most of our users are still there.
Right, but even that one, I guess it's that we do want people to move up, and so if there's something important, we should probably pull it back. But otherwise, I'd be in the, like Jeremiah says, let's not pull things back by default. Let's pull things that are actually needed. And so if something's reported on one of those branches, then I'd say we should fix it there. Otherwise, I'm not so sure.
When does the LTS plan have it go into maintenance mode?
Next October.
0.12? 0.12 is going to be almost dead next October.
Yeah.
We pull it into LTS next October? Really?
Well, no, it's in LTS now. It goes.
Sorry, you pull it out of LTS into maintenance, because isn't it dead 2016 December because of OpenSSL?
Yes, it's only like a 3-month maintenance.
The graphic
we
that
open
we
a proposal looking at shifting that?
The graphic that we have on the LTS repo states maintenance for V12 starting in April of 2016.
Oh.
And then completely finishing maintenance in December.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd be wanting to change those numbers, because part of the LTS is supposed to be, we'll give you this length of LTS, and if we start shortening it, the OpenSSL was a good rationale and solid reason, but I think otherwise I wouldn't want people to see that we're just changing the dates.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the thing that just seems odd to me is calling it active LTS when we're essentially doing maintenance.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know that we've ever sort of worked through what's the actual difference between the two, have we?
It's mostly just active LTS gets more stuff, and for maintenance we don't really maintain it except when we need to. And that's so some of this already has come from the way 0.12 was before the merger, because how 0.10 had already ended up not that long after it was cut, and then how 0.12 ended up, they went into what was basically maintenance much faster. And we also didn't have a release process to deal with that, so it ended up being about on the same pace as 0.10.
Right, so it'll probably work itself out the next release that comes out, right? It's just, you're right, it's a bit of a special situation.
Hello, Rod.
All right. Awesome. Hey, Rod. Rod, just to catch you up real quick, we're talking about the kind of the LTS plan for 0.12, and how active should that be right now? Should we coordinate, really pulling things back from 4 master to actively there, or should we just basically treat it as if it's in maintenance at this point?
Have we had inquiries about that, or is this just internal discussion?
I haven't, Miles. You're the one that raised it. Have you been asked about it?
I actually raised it due to a conversation that I had with Rod, so it's internal.
It seems like it's mostly just basing off of what we've actually been doing with it. And perhaps what is feasible to do with it. I'm not entirely sure.
I'd almost say that, I mean, if a critical issue comes up and it's like an obvious kind of fix that needs to be made, we should probably go ahead and do it. But anything that's probably not kind of a critical bug, let's not worry about it. So it's almost treated as if it is in maintenance.
Right. Now, I would say if people report issues on 12 versus 4, then that's also a reason to look at pulling it into it. Like, people are actually encountering it in use. That's another good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I got some numbers last week on our Node.js Linux distributions on the different versions that people are using, and this is indicative of production for people who are using at least the Debian and Ubuntu-based ones. And we're about at parity between 0.12, 0.10, and 4 at the moment. So we're getting about equal downloads for them. So it's still in heavy use for deployment. But it's surprising to me that we're not getting that many reports about 0.12 stuff. I'm just wondering what that means.
Is there any chance people would report them on master instead of 12, or?
Well, I don't think there's been any new issues opened over in the archive, and I haven't seen anything new
I
opened.
think I've seen 1 to 2 0.12 specific issues. I think most of it probably gets reported on master if it still exists on master, if we haven't already fixed it. So
yeah, it suggests to me that it's in a holding pattern for users, so it's just working for them, and if it's not, then they understand that they need to come up with a migration path. And I've heard that from other users before. I think it was Medium. Medium said that they jumped to 0.12 because they wanted some of the debugging features in there, but they understood that it was sort of a DOA release line, and they really wanted to get off it as soon as possible. And I think they switched to 4. But I suspect that there's a bit of that out there as well, that people are using it, they understand they have to get off it at some point. It's just working, they're getting by with it, so let's get up with it.
So
maybe we should take that back to the issue tracker then.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have general consensus that it's largely in maintenance. If things get opened up, reported directly to it, we deal with them. If not, it's not a high priority, and just kind of go from there. And if something critical comes up, we can discuss it on the tracker. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, Rod, since you weren't here, I have a few agenda items that were pulled from the issues. Did you have any other agenda items to cover? You should have access to the minutes document as well.
No, not from me.
Okay, so first item on the agenda then, discuss possible clarifications to the LTS messaging and labeling. It's issue number 63 in the LTS repo. Let's copy this into the chat. All right, so the short version of this is that in communicating to folks about the LTS plan and their release cycles, there seems to be quite a bit of confusion between how we've labeled things. And one of the suggestions that came up from the Linux Foundation marketing folks last week, when I was sitting down talking with them, is possibly renaming our the LTS. We could still call it long-term support, but one, apparently the acronym LTS itself is causing confusion, and so the recommendation is not to use the LTS acronym and just call it long-term support, and then to rename the LTS branch to call it stable, and to call what we currently call stable current, and then come up with some other name for things that are coming off of master. The goal is to try to simplify it so it makes it a little more understandable what's going on. I don't know, he had some comments on that as well. I don't know, what do you guys think?
So what was the suggestion for the better name? Sorry.
It was, I think there was some in the issue, but basically it would be LTS becomes stable, stable becomes current.
I'm
So-
okay with anything that doesn't rename our LTS to stable.
To FreeBSD users, this would probably be kind of confusing because in FreeBSD land, current is what we call master, and stable is the what we call stable branch.
Personally, I'm fine with leaving the labels as they are. I just think we need to do a better job of communicating it.
I think it was brought up in the issue. To me, this seems almost more of a marketing problem. If we have a handful of talks go out there and some community effort done to just make sure there's awareness, I think that may be sufficient.
One of
I quite like the idea of renaming stable to current. I mean, we could come up with another one, but it's the stable that I find problematic.
I would be okay with that. Again, just don't rename LTS to stable.
Rod, I didn't quite hear what you had said. What you're suggesting.
Sorry, I was just saying that it's the stable label is I find problematic when talking. And so this is the issue that we've got long-term support, which is essentially stable, and then we've got this thing that we release, and it's not particularly stable because we are bumping 7 minor. So in terms of its feature set and everything else, it's not stable at all. And so, for a lot of people, I think they confuse that with. Sorry, that's not me. They confuse that with LTS. So I'd be happy for that name to change.
Yeah, somebody's playing games. Okay, so we can probably brainstorm a few names, kind of bike shed it in the GitHub tracker, and then go from there. One of the other suggestions that the Linux Foundation folks had was to come up with a presentation. So Michael had created this foundation presentation repo that kind of reusable assets for folks to go out and help communicate about various things. I was thinking about creating a set of slides that cover specifically LTS and how the release cycle works. So we can use that as kind of a way of helping folks describe what's happening. So I can take to-do and take on a first version of that, but it's going to have to be kind of a lower priority. Probably can get it done by late January. Anybody have any other thoughts on that one? All right, so I'm going to capture this as, and basically let's rename release.
Is it just me, or is it James that's dropping out?
You guys hear me okay?
I think I hear him okay.
Okay. Well, can you hear me right now, Michael?
Yeah, I think you're better now. It just sounded like you were chopping in and out for a second.
It might have been because I was typing a bit. It might have been interfering.
Yeah. Okay.
Document LTS release process better and foundation slides. Okay. Anything else for number 63? Okay. Let's see what time we got. Okay. So the next one is number 62. Discuss possibility of adjusting the LTS schedule for better alignment with the V8 schedule. I would also throw into this let's see what issue number is it. We also have the OpenSSL updates that's coming. It's issue 4270. So the short version of this. Well, you know what? Ali's here. Ali, why don't you give us the short version, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So the motivation is I want to be able to pick up more recent version of V8 for the next LTS, and I don't think the 6-month runway before before we move stable to LTS is necessary. So I think it would be better if we reevaluate it, given that we have an experience from the 4 LTS, to see if we really need 6 months or whether we can do an LTS based on a shorter runway.
Yeah, I might try and cast it a different way. Like, I think, the general policy of 6 months makes sense to me, but if there's something valuable enough this time to adjust it, then it would make sense to me. So is it, are there specific, I think you have specific things in mind, right, that you want to get delay?
I'm not talking in particular just this time. I'm just saying that 6 months, I haven't seen a rationale behind why we need 6 months before stable moves into LTS. I mean, based on the 4 LTS cycle, we know that we need much less. It ended up working really well in 4. So if there's a possibility of taking a more recent V8, because LTS is going to be around for a very long time, and I think it's great that people can use arrow functions in the 4 LTS. And not having those would have been sad for the ecosystem. So I don't think we should hold back on a newer version of V8 just because we picked a number of 6 months at some point. I want to make sure there's a good reason behind why that needs to be 6 months and not shorter.
Yeah, I think the rationale was to give time for the community to catch up, modules to be adjusted, all those kinds of things. So I guess it comes down to how long, do we have any new data that tells us how long that takes?
I think in 4 we know that we were able to pull it off really well with a significantly shorter runway. So we certainly don't need 6 months.
Ali also mentioned at Node.js Interactive that it's also part because if he or anyone else wants to do anything on the V8 side for Node, the runway to get that into an LTS is cut off 9 months before, I think, because we have 6 months leading into the LTS, and then there is an extra. How many versions of V8 is it before it comes into stable that a V8 feature freeze happens for a particular branch, and how long is that?
So there is, I mean, there's the stable. So basically, we pick up V8 stable. So V8 team has already gone through the feature stabilization and canaries of that particular stream before Node even picks it up. So you have to work backwards from when a stable ships. I think I would approximately, I would say, about 2 cycles before a stable ships would be approximately when we would not want to put more features into a particular V8 release.
Right, that's 12 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So the cutoff is before canary gets cut. Is that correct?
I'll have to go look up the details.
Okay.
Long story short, I mean,
From what I've seen, it's like about a week before we're actively maintaining the PPC port. So we generally see maybe a week before or so them saying, hey, we're going to slow things down, make sure you're stable because we're branching.
Yeah, there's a difference between feature freezes and basically no more risky changes.
Right. Yeah. No. I could see then before that you'd probably say, okay, no more big things.
So, but again, I think, I mean, whatever the exact timings are, I think those are less relevant. I mean, what's more relevant is that 6 months runway plus additional runway that V8 team needs to stabilize particular features ends up being a significant extra time that for somebody who's going to try and decide that I'm going to do Node.js focused work on inside V8, and the benefits will be apparent significantly down the road. So it's incentivizes work. I mean, longer term work for Node.js.
So do you have if we're not going to pick 6 months, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking I mean, I'm open for input as well. I think either 4 months or 3 months sounds like a better number to me.
As low as 2 was mentioned, I think. Yeah.
So, I mean, just to make sure it's clear, I mean, this, and I'll correct me if I'm wrong if I misunderstood something from our conversation. We would still have a 6-month cycle between our stables, but the suggestion is to, instead of cutting the stables in October and April, that we would shift that window, either a couple months in either direction, but still cut the LTS in October, or roll it over to LTS in October. So instead of releasing in October, we might release in just strawman in December, right? Now, there's a couple of things there when we were putting together the release plan. The idea of releasing in December or earlier than that was not well received by folks, and at least the people I talked to. That the idea of having an October and April was kind of the ideal time frame for doing the releases, the stable releases, for upgrade cycles and kind of resource staffing and that kind of thing.
If we threw out cause it sounds like the October timeline worked well and was good. So if we keep the LTS at that, I'm just wondering, because we basically need a new, December major every time we pick up a new V8. Are we talking about going to having 2 stables and then the LTS?
No, all we're talking about is really comes down to, do we want to shift when we cut stables? So instead of April, October, it would probably end, well, it depends. It could end up being like, what would it be, January and July, or August, February?
I don't really understand, because
Yeah.
V8 releases. V8 does a major release every 6 to 7 weeks, so it would appear to me that from a V8 perspective, it's pretty predictable. Well, if our releases are in August and February, then it should be quite easy to target specific features you want to land in an LTS release, because you can more or less predict what major version of V8 we're going to pick up.
Correct. This just reduces the amount of time that you would need to target ahead. So instead of being almost 9 months, it could be down as much as 5 months.
What I guess I don't understand is where those 9 months come from.
That is, so the V8 that's in an LTS is from April, so it's 6 months until it turns into LTS. Basically yeah. So this is talking about from the perspective of someone who's taking up the version when it goes into LTS and not when it's initially cut. So there's the 6-month gap between LTS and when it was originally cut, and then there's another almost 3 months since V8 had a feature freeze on that version of V8 that we would be picking up before it becomes stable.
Okay, this I follow. And how is Ali proposing to reduce that gap?
By shifting the release, our stable cuts. So right now, our LTS and our stable cut are aligned in October, right? We kept the LTS cut in October, but moved the stable to July or August, and then move the spring one up to in January or February. Then we will at least shorten that runway time by 2 months.
Okay, this is the gap between the first stable release and when stable goes into LTS mode.
Correct.
Okay.
But what this would do is, right now we've been talking about doing the 6 in April. What we're talking about is having 6 slip to July.
Or June, whichever, or any amount less.
Okay, I have no strong opinion, but at least now I understand how it's supposed to work.
Right, so we'll end up with the exact same number of releases, just a shorter gap between the stable being cut and becoming LTS.
Now, we have been telling everybody that 6 is coming in April. We've been spreading this message wide and far. Does it do more harm than good for us to come up and say, well, you know what, we changed our mind, we decided we're going to do it in June or July?
Yeah,
we may have valid reasons
after we haven't given it a go. We haven't actually done a proper run yet to step back and say, oh, that didn't work, let's try differently. We've worked really hard to get this message out there and to change it. I'm not looking forward to that task. I'm just wondering if there's another way to look at it, because the concern here from Ali is about getting more recent V8 into LTS. We could potentially revisit our policy of 1 V8 per Semver major and do something like we can upgrade V8 as long as we can keep stable ABI. And that has been possible potentially with 4.7. I think, Ben, you might have commented that there's a couple of things that we could have modified in V8 to keep a stable ABI. And we could have upgraded this at 4.7.
Yeah, that's right.
So we could be doing that, and that would essentially be keeping a soft fork of V8 just to modify those ABI things. And during that stable window, the 6 months for both of them, so version 5 and version 6 and 7, all of them, before they go LTS, we could be upgrading V8 as long as we can meet those conditions, because that's what really matters. That's why we had that policy of Semver major for one version of V8. It's because of the ABI stability.
Great. As long as we can ensure the stable ABI, I'm good with that. I think that also would transition well if and when we do get this kind of abstraction layer thing figured out, if that does emerge. I think it kind of flows with the same idea there. So I'd be fine with that. It's just, how do we ensure that there's no ABI break? Do we have a clear process for that?
I think in general it's going to be hard to be able to paper over API changes. I mean, so at this point, I mean, without the native API getting more solid, it might not always be doable to pick up a new version of V8 but keep the same API.
And in that case, following this, we just would not take that new version then, if we can't do it.
Yeah, and which is going to be sad because we'll be leaving performance and newer features on the table, and not shipping them in LTS.
Then you should petition the V8 people to work harder on API and ABI stability.
Yeah.
They are working on that. I think the 6-month runway, just because we picked that number at one point in time and now we must live with it forever. I mean, that sounds like we picked a number. We should have evidence that it's the right number. Better fix it now than later.
Or conversely, better see if our hypotheses originally work out to be true, and if not, then adjust afterwards. We haven't given it a go yet.
I think we have. I mean, we've done the 4 LTS, and I think the 4 LTS was really successful. The ecosystem has been able to catch up to LTS really, really well. I'm really impressed with how much progress we've made with that. So we have data that says 6 months is actually not necessary.
Well, so the reason behind the giving that run, there's lots of reasons, but the one that Michael mentioned about letting the ecosystem catch up, letting native add-on authors catch up, all that sort of stuff. LTS is all about enterprise usage, and having overlapping LTS is about giving them migration paths. And if we look at the current enterprise pattern, there's a lot of them. I would, from my understanding of our customers and what I hear, the majority of them are still on 10 and 12, and they're trying to find that migration path to 4. It's still painful. So I don't think we have been successful with that small window. I think we're living out what we expected, which is it's going to take a while for enterprise to catch up. And I don't really want to have to repeat that with version 6. I think I'd like version 6 to be, okay, it's ready. We need to have our migration path in process. October is a good window. Let's plan for our migration either in October or maybe in February. That kind of window there. So let it bake for a little while. Let it do it in February. But having that 6 months of letting the ecosystem catch up was the vital thing for enterprise.
So I think there's 2 issues being conflated here. One issue is the module ecosystem and whether they can adapt to the new API. And there's the other issue, which is an enterprise finds it really expensive to move from one version of Node to another version of Node. So whether or not for the 6th cycle, the module ecosystem is moving from, so the transition from 0.10 to 4 is pretty big, and there were some big API changes that are harder. But I don't think that should be the litmus test that you're using. I mean, it's going to be, so as far as the module ecosystem is concerned, that's why you need a runway. An enterprise needs time to transition, and that's not necessarily related to the API changes. It's more related to how much time an enterprise needs to migrate up to a newer version of anything.
No, it's multiple things. It's is the ecosystem ready for me to upgrade? Can all of the open source libraries that I use, including native add-ons, work with what I'm using? Can I do that? Can I press the upgrade button?
Yeah, so again, without knowing the API 4.9 and 5.1, that, I mean, you're going to make a transition anyway, whether it's to 4.9 or 5.1, that's what we're debating.
Okay, so Ali, I don't want to diminish your position as a user of this, because I know Google Cloud is a massive user of LTS. Like, it's a significant user, so I don't want to downplay that at all. So your perspective is, of course, completely valid. I'm just wondering about the perspective of the average LTS user. And we heard from Tom Croucher at Node Interactive that they're just getting onto 0.10, and that's great for them. They're happy to have moved off 0.8, and that's a typical story. We've got one big customer that's still on 0.10. They're talking about going to version 4, but they're trying to figure out how to do it. But it's working for them, and they're happy with their Node deployment. That's a typical story. I'm just wondering how much your concerns that you've raised about the V8 stuff matter to LTS users. So how much does the feature set matter to LTS users? How much does the those minor performance differences that come with each V8 release matter to LTS users? I'm just not sure that those things really turn the dial that much for LTS users, aside from Google, who is connected to the V8 team that has better insight into this and ability to actually change the V8 roadmap. I don't see the weight of these concerns outweighing for one, the difficulty in changing our roadmap right now without giving it a go, and two, the potential instability of shortening that runway. I'd like us to give it a go in the way we've planned it, and I keep on telling people when I'm communicating the roadmap, the release policy, I keep on saying to people, this is our best guess of how things will work best, but we're open to change and expect this to adapt over time. I'm not really comfortable with going out there and saying, oh, look, we took a guess on how things should work, and we're taking another guess now that that's not going to work as well as this new guess we're making. I'd like us to give it a go and then adjust beyond that. But I'm also open to doing the ABI change thing. And just back to that quickly, with regard to how much work that would be, and whether it's going to be possible. I think the amount of work it would be to maintain ABI stability depends on how much work we are willing to put in, because some V8 versions have tiny ABI changes, and we can paper over them. Some have large. We could also fix those. It just would be a lot more work. So it depends on how dedicated the people that are doing the V8 work in Node, how dedicated they are to upgrading V8. If they want to put in a lot of time and effort to keep ABI stability, then it's still possible, even with major changes.
So, yeah, we're coming up here to the time check, but the one possibility that I see is, again, we also have the OpenSSL update here to consider, which is I think end of April when it's supposed to go stable. If we, and of course we got to bring us the full CTC to decide, but if we decided to hold off on 6 stable until like the first week in May, so we can bring in whatever the V8 is at that time, and also the OpenSSL. It gives us a little bit more time, not a lot, but a little bit. And then let's look at it then. Let's kind of revisit this question then to see if it's possible to bring in a newer V8 in that V6 cycle that won't break ABI, to see if it is possible for us to update without breaking folks, but taking some of these new features. And what I'm saying is we don't have to decide right now.
I have a question related to that OpenSSL thing. Do OpenSSL upgrades like that happen at any regular cadence, or do they just do them whenever they have like stuff?
I think OpenSSL is on a new track at the moment. They're pretty much under new management, and they're getting much more organized than they used to be. So I don't think there's a new pattern that we need to adjust to. This is just how it is.
Okay.
I
just wondered
yeah.
if, like, every April then there'd be a new minor
Yeah.
or something.
There's not. Unless they're working on that now, that idea, it's not out there.
Okay.
So just back to the ABI and that discussion. That's an interesting one to consider in terms of incentivizing the V8 team. So they, that is part of the discussion. We had that in the issue tracker. If we changed our policy to say we can upgrade V8, and it's not just fixed in time to whatever happens when we cut stable, then we're actually sending the message back to the V8 team. We'd love to work with you more closely, but we can't handle ABI breakage. So if you can minimize that, then we can keep on taking upgrades. We can all work together happily. We can get V8 on the server. We can get a huge user base giving more feedback to V8 progress, etc., etc. I think that might be a positive thing for the relationship with the V8 team.
I would agree.
There is another approach, although I hesitate to bring it up because I expect people expect me to volunteer for it. What we could do is that, well, right now we export the V8 API directly to add-ons. What we could do instead is that we put a small shim before the real V8 API, and that shim would emulate, for example, the V8 4.6 API, and internally we would translate to the newer V8 API, so 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, whatever we upgrade to. Of course, we may get to a point where V8 makes such massive change that we cannot adapt. But
Yeah, at that point we just say no. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to how much work that is, right?
Yeah. And also remember that it's work that we have to do over the lifetime of the LTS. For backporting, it's going to increase cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would have to take that into account to determine what the cutoff point is for changes.
The upside is that, for example, we won't be on the hook for doing security fixes, backports of security fixes and bug fixes, because we should be able to just keep upgrading V8 to whatever the current stable version is. That would be, well, a brave new world.
I'm not sure we could justify doing it in the LTS period, but we could do it. But the 6-month stable period, yeah. I would, even if we were able to, towards the end of the 6 months, getting close to LTS, so for version 6, for example, I would be hesitant to support doing it right up until that 6 months, because one of the other things that people look for with LTS is what is the profile of performance and memory consumption.
Right,
and if we don't have a stable V8, then you can't get that understanding until it's been locked in.
Yeah.
Yeah, there has to be at least some runway of time there, whether it's 2-3 months, whatever, to establish that. Okay. So I think what we're roughly settling on here is, for now, not making a firm decision, but keeping the schedule as it is now, but leaving the door open that if we can figure out how to do this with stable ABI, then we could take V8 changes after, within that 6-month period, as long as it's not too close to when we actually roll over to LTS.
So how about this for a suggestion? So it sounds like we're in rough agreement there, that we keep this open for discussion. Also, that shifting of the April for this time because of OpenSSL and potentially taking a V8 upgrade. I think that's fine, the whole V8 upgrade thing, because we knew that we would never we'd rarely be in line with the 6-week window, because that changes every year. We did say initially that we were willing to be a bit soft with that, like we were with version 5. Delay an upgrade to get a newer V8 if it's really close. That's fine. So how about I suggest that we take both of those points to a TSC meeting, CTC meeting. So delaying version 6 for OpenSSL and potentially a V8 if it comes out quick enough, which it should do if the timing's right. So maybe that'll be 5.0, I guess. And also the upgrading V8 discussion, take that to the CTC because that's really a question for them. Also that we invite Ali to come to the CTC meeting to represent his perspective, and also see if we can make sure that Seth from the V8 team is around for that one as well, so that we can have a more wide discussion.
Sounds good to me.
Me.
Yeah, it'd be interesting with the wider group to see what comes out of that.
All right, I'll get that documented in the minutes. That's good. And we're coming up to the top of the hour. The remaining two issues are fairly minor. I believe 61 is actually already dealt with this. Discussed the possibility of occasional Semver minor bumps. I just missed that. We discussed that one before. The other thing is we're still not officially chartered, so I'm going to write up a draft charter and get its PR open. Node.js, I'll send out the notifications on that for review here in the next day or two.
Whoops.
Did we actually discuss number 61? I don't remember that.
Yeah, we discussed this a few weeks ago.
Okay.
This specifically came up with regards to a couple of V8 backports that we were going to go ahead and land them, but we're going to bundle them up into one release. And as long as they're purely additive and not.
Can I make a suggestion here? Is it perhaps we can have a thing where we say something like, because I'm thinking what might be valuable here is to have some sort of predictability in when there might be some minor features added. So maybe we can do, like for LTS, like every, I don't know, quarterly sounds good to me, but maybe it's not. So like quarterly we go and say, okay, is there anything like that we want to do a minor bump for, and then, have that sort of window with.
I think that makes sense.
So for the Semver minors, how do they affect people, right? They're just adding functionality.
So the thing is that Ben brought up that makes them Semver minor is that because they're command line flags and because of how our stuff with command line flags works, if someone decides to upgrade that and use the flag, but that doesn't work out for them, if they roll back to a version, that flag will give them an error.
Right. So it's the rollback situation that it affects.
Yes.
But as far as
that goes for really anything you add, right? So.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, it's
what makes it Semver minor.
Go back, and you're depending on it, then it's the same effect.
Yeah, but then at the same time, it's a brand new feature that we just added, and as far as the inconvenience is concerned, it's just a flag that you opted into that you have to opt out of.
Right, but that's like using any new API that's added, and if you roll back a version, it's not going to work, and that's sort
the
of what
problem
we
with
define.
APIs is that they're third-party users of the APIs that you have to worry about. With the flags, it's actually much more direct.
Yeah, without expressing an opinion on this particular, the flag thing, I just make a note here that there is an expectation out there. The LTS terminology does indicate a lot more stability than Semver minor brings with it. So when you're using, for example, RHEL or Debian or Ubuntu LTS, when you're using these things that are labeled LTS, you don't expect them to be adding features. That you expect them to be stable and just to be supported as they are at that point in time. And if we're not following that model, we have a bit of a problem with our messaging. I wouldn't mind us trying to be consistent and piggybacking on the existing expectations of what LTS means as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think tooling changes, on the other hand, better tooling seems like a good thing to be backporting.
We are at the top of the hour, and I know I have to drop for another call.
You're
So why
supposed to
don't
put your
we?
radio voice on when you say that. We're at the top of the hour.
So let's, if there's more we need to discuss on that one, then we can continue it on the next call. I think our next meeting. Do we want to do it in 2 weeks? I know quite a few people are out on.
That's like the 28th.
Yeah, I'm going to be out.
Okay. Do we want to push until January then for the next one?
That would probably be better.
Sounds good to
And
me.
we can handle some of these other discussions in the CTC meeting.
Right. Okay. I will get the next one scheduled for early January then.
And it's time for the news. Okay.
All right,
Thanks,
all.
James.
Okay.
Thanks, Ali.
Thanks.
I'll let you
Bye.
know about the CTC meeting, Ali.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks all.